It's always fascinating to talk to influential chefs. And I think no one is probably more influential of this generation than Daniel Humm.
Yes, sir.
Chef owner of 11 Madison Park, #1 from World's 50 Best in 2017, a restaurant that really redefined what a city restaurant is. What is a New York restaurant?
Yes, sir.
And what I found so fascinating about Daniel Humm is his social courage. The way that he said, this is what we're doing. 11 Madison Park is going to be a new restaurant. We can't operate the same way. We are going to go plant-based. And not only from a climate standpoint, but from a creative standpoint.
Yeah.
And as we've heard from other chefs throughout the series, Sean Sherman, when you're focused on indigenous, you're going to be focused on plants. And also asking all of these new questions. When you change a restaurant to plant-based, you're forcing the question, what is luxury?
Yeah.
What is a course? And I think those changes that happened at 11 Madison Park have sparked this progress across the industry. Not long after 11 Madison Park became plant-based, there were at least 3 other restaurants in the top 100 restaurants that became plant-forward. They became mostly plants. Oyster in Washington, D.C. became the first vegan restaurant to win a James Beard Award. And so you're starting to see these pockets of progress and this influence over the industry that we'll hear from him kind of talking about the progress in the industry, but this influence that has happened and now plant-based continuing to be one of the most important changes that's happened across the industry, where so many chefs are stepping back and looking at the foods that come into their restaurant and what they need to focus on.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Obviously a part of this series is we're talking to global influential figures across the industry. It was so important to also make sure we had several chefs who are really affecting culture and talk about the challenges of success, the challenges of continuing to grow. I think similarly with Elena Reygadas, chef owner of Rosetta, and she won Best Female Chef in 2023. Her, along with Enrique Olvera and the chefs that came before, the Mexican chefs that came before, who have redefined, like what you said, what is Mexican food? Because there was this stigma, and I think in the last 10 to 12 years, it's been challenged, but that Mexican food is cheap, or Mexican food shouldn't be expensive, or it shouldn't be valued in the way that French food is or Italian food is. And so in that conversation with her and even with Daniel, hearing how they're navigating these successes, but also navigating a lot of the challenges, I think it's really fascinating. It gives a lot of insights to the industry and also the future generation of chefs, and also empowers them to continue to layer onto what we said earlier of finding their own identity and ultimately leaning into that.
I think that's absolutely right. And when I think about Elena is a mom. She has several restaurants. She's encouraging more women to become part of the industry. She's doing that mentorship that we've talked about on other episodes. But one of the questions we asked her was about the pressures of being best female chef. Should we even be using those words?
Yes, sir.
And I love hearing from her talking about the importance of identity, her identity as a Mexican woman, a fine dining chef, but also a mother in the industry who also needs quite a bit of support. And Elena being so open about those challenges, I think is another way that we could start to get to progress, because we will have more conversations about those challenges, that we just won't ignore those problems, especially that women we have in the industry, that we will be able to encourage more women to follow their passion in the food industry.
You're listening to Effects of Change, a Bon Appetit and On the Pass original series about progress, co-hosted by Jamila Robinson, editor-in-chief of Bon Appetit, and myself, Gabriel Ornelas, creator and host of On the Pass.
Now let's hear from Chef Daniel Humm of 11 Madison Park.
I've been at 11 Madison Park for almost 20 years, and it's just been an incredible journey. And early on in my career, it was all about the accolades and winning awards. And I think that was a mountain I wanted to climb. We wanted to be the best restaurant in the world. We wanted to have the 3 stars and the 4 stars and the James Beard Awards and all these things. In fact, there was no award that was too small. We wanted them all. There is beauty around the awards because it can bring the industry together. And it definitely brings your team together in having a common goal, in having sort of a North Star that's sort of like easy to talk about and focus on. And it works and it's sort of measurable, even though you understand that all these awards and rankings, it's kind of a silly thing. And what is there? There is no best restaurant in the world. But it does work in aligning your team and sort of going towards a direction. And it does make the restaurant better and it makes people push harder. But then as you're accumulating these awards, all of a sudden there's less and less of them to have sort of a North Star. And in my particular case, when we reached the #1 restaurant spot in the world, that was sort of the last of the awards that we didn't have. And so at that moment, immediately, every journalist was asking me, so what's next? And you sort of have an answer and you're like, well, let me just enjoy this moment, or it's harder to keep the awards than to get there, and all sort of these answers. But it's all kind of shallow and kind of meaningless. The truth is that you don't know. The truth is that now all of a sudden you actually don't know what's next. And for me, that was difficult because I think it brought a lot of instability within the team. People didn't have that North Star anymore, and people had different ideas what that meant with having all this success. Does this mean opening more restaurants? Does that mean aligning ourselves with more brands? Does that mean doing other things outside of our business? Because now we have this kind of voice. And I think it was difficult for all of us to understand. And I think the pandemic sort of came at the right time for us because we were sort of riding that wave. Like when we became the best restaurant in the world, we sort of went into a renovation of the space, which was beautiful. And there was a lot of excitement about that. We did sort of these pop-ups in the Hamptons and then in Aspen, and there was a lot of momentum and a lot of excitement, but then we kind of ran out of ideas. And then the pandemic hit, and obviously that was devastating for our industry. And it was devastating for us because we lost a lot of our team. Like our team works from around the world and people couldn't stay in New York. They left and their visas expired. And that's obviously heartbreaking because in the restaurant business, like when you talk about real estate, they always tell you about location. In the restaurant business, it's people. And when you lose your team, it's hard. But it brought a lot of good for us. We turned the restaurant into a community kitchen. I'm a co-founder of an organization called Rethink Food. We take food from restaurants, prepare meals for people in need. And in New York City, there's 8 million people living here. And in normal times, there's about 1 million that are food insecure. In the beginning of the pandemic, that number went to 2 million immediately. And that's a staggering number. That's 25% of people living in New York City who are food insecure. And I don't need to tell you, these are not homeless people. These are people with having 2 jobs and 3 jobs, and now losing one of them, now having a hard time putting food on the table. I felt I had the responsibility to act. I had a kitchen space that was empty. I had cooks at home, unemployed. I had the connection to the farmers, hearing about they're sitting on food and food is going bad because everything was shut down. And so we started this community kitchen out of 11 Madison. And it ended up being 18 months that we cooked about 6,000-7,000 meals each day for people in need. And not only did we cook the meals, but we also went out into the neighborhoods because I wanted to understand where the meals are going. I met amazing people on this journey. There are angels everywhere. there are people who have very little and give everything. And so it was really moving for me. And even though during that time our business was facing bankruptcy, we didn't know what the future was look like. All of a sudden, I got up in the morning and feeling happy and feeling like I had a purpose. I couldn't wait to be in the kitchen. I couldn't wait to be with my team. I couldn't wait to go into the neighborhoods because I really felt like what we were doing made a difference. And so it allowed me to reconnect with my craft and my language of food in a whole new way. And I'm grateful for it. But then when also the opportunity came to reopen the restaurant, which we were very fortunate that our landlord, they reached out at some point in the pandemic and they said, hey, we see what you're doing. This building needs you. The city needs you. We're going to help you reopen and we're going to forgive your rent. So then we knew that we could reopen. And when I put my creative hat back on, I knew that I've changed. I knew that there is no way I want to open the same restaurant as before. And also here, I felt like I wanted to use this language of food to make a change. And I think we are all aware, and in particular, people who are working closely with food, we're very aware of how our food system is broken and how we need to change our practices. I mean, there's ingredients that have completely disappeared. Ingredients taste different. Ingredients used to be wild and now they're farmed. I mean, I was just in Puglia, Italy, and that area along the coast used to be famous for fresh sea urchin and many other seafoods, but in particular sea urchin. And there are still all these restaurants where you go there and you sit on the plastic benches, super charming, and you're eating like the sea urchin out of the shell, but none of the sea urchin is from there anymore. But this is just one example of how everyone is trying to hold on to these ideas. Like caviar is a prime example. Caviar is this luxury ingredient from the past and it has a romance to it. Today, there's nothing romantic or luxurious or even delicious about caviar. And I think we're all guilty of it. I think it's a lot more comfortable to stay the course, to not make any waves, to pretend like the sea urchin is still from here, to pretend like the caviar is still this incredible rare thing. But I felt, and I think it did come with having been able to reach a certain pinnacle that I set out for myself. And I think from there on, I sort of had the confidence and I felt I had the responsibility to now use this platform to speak. We need to speak. Chefs need to speak because the industry is speaking. Like the investors in the food space are speaking. Chefs need to speak. When we started out this journey of going fully plant-based, there was a lot of fear. And we felt like this might be limiting because we used so many ingredients before, and we learned the techniques to cook them perfectly. And we have chefs with us who they went to work at a fish restaurant to perfectly cook fish, and then they went to a butcher shop to perfectly butcher. And now we're saying we're only going to cook plant-based. Does that mean all that knowledge they have to leave behind? That can be scary. But the truth is, no knowledge will ever be wasted. But I think in the beginning, we felt it might be limiting. But what we have found is that it's been the opposite. It's been extremely expanding. In fact, we were limited before. When I look back to what a meal was at 11 Madison Park and how the season reflected in that meal, we just prepared condiments for proteins. We prepared seasonal condiments for the proteins that are pretty much given. And by the way, almost every restaurant is serving the same kind of proteins through a meal. You kind of already know when you're sitting down in a fine dining restaurant, you have a pretty good idea of how that meal is going to unfold. Maybe one lobster is with lemon and the next one is with tarragon, but otherwise you're pretty much set. And we were very much on that same program. But today, when we create meals, there's no sort of guidebook of what says what is the main course or what is the appetizer or what's. So I think today our entire dish is representing the season. And that is the most free I've ever felt as a chef since I started cooking 30 years ago. 11 Madison Park from the outside seems to be like been successful for a very long time and continues to be successful. And it's true some level, but I would lie if I wouldn't say that there's been times where it's been really scary to leave everything behind that we were famous for. Our restaurant was well known for duck, for lobster, for caviar, for foie gras. We're famous for that. We perfected that. And it's really scary at times. There's been times where our reservations are down because it's like when you're sort of like breaking new ground into a new space, it's sort of a balance. Like it's good to be one step ahead, but at times we're maybe 2 steps ahead and we're kind of missing the audience. The audience is maybe not quite ready yet. But the one thing I always say is like, it's progress, not perfection. And I think we live in a place where people are so focused on when someone is changing, then you're under, especially when you had success before, you're under a microscope. And maybe you're changing in one direction, but maybe there's elements of your company aren't changing yet because you can't change overnight everything. So when you're changing, you're inherently imperfect. You could not change if every step has to be completely perfect because there's some exploration. Maybe sometimes you're pushing a little bit too far. You got to pull back a little bit. If you change here, then you also got to change there. And like, it's impossible to do it all at the same time. I'm grateful. And I think we were in a unique position because people who love what we do and are really strong supporters who are going to support no matter what. And I'm so grateful to everyone who has been in such strong support. But if we would have set out as a new restaurant, trying to be the next plant-based restaurant, I'm not sure if we would have been able to succeed because there were a lot of voices who tried to criticize us for change. There was a lot of fear. What was hard too, it was in my own industry. All of a sudden, I felt like an outsider. I've been so part of this industry, but then stepping out into this space, all of a sudden, I was very much an outsider. And that's hard and scary. So like, it might all seem so wonderful from the outside, but in the inside, there are definitely hard moments. And I think that the thing keeps it all going is the core team of our organization who all believe so strongly in this. What's been beautiful about this change is also that our guests are much younger today than ever before. Our audience is much more diverse than ever before. And also actually where we take inspirations from, we used to be, I'm a student of the French cuisine. So 80% of where the inspiration came from before the pandemic was all sort of coming heavily from France or Europe. But today the inspirations come from mostly other places. And so it has also opened us up in a whole new way. But as you're creating a new language, you're going to make mistakes and you have to learn and you're not going to be perfect. But there is a lot of progress. And that's what matters on this level. Everyone is going to cook a perfect piece of fish or carrot or whatever, and it's going to be seasonally nice. And there are a lot of very talented people in this industry. And I think sometimes there's the question about art and art versus craft and where does food really fall into it. You kind of got to perfect your craft. Like Miles Davis said, you kind of have to learn the rules before you can break them. And for a long time, I looked at this very much as a craft, and I wanted to cook the fish perfectly and season it perfectly and so forth. A great inspiration for me is art. Most of my friends are artists, and I've studied art since I've been 10 years old, and I probably can talk more about that even than about cooking techniques. But I was always fascinated by the moments in art where things really changed. And this could be as early as like Monet, when he, in some of his paintings, he didn't finish the canvases all the way to the end because he felt there was a beauty to that. And that was really radical at that time. In fact, when you look at that corner of a Monet painting, it feels like an abstract expressionist painting, a movement that came 70 years later. So I've been fascinated by that. And the idea that in my own practice, at some point, I could be in a space where I could be the first to walk into a new direction is pretty unbelievable. And during the pandemic, it became very clear to me I had that opportunity in front of me. And as scary as it was, and as unknown, the excitement of having that opportunity to step on that stage and being the first, having a fine dining restaurant, deciding to leave all animal products behind. That excitement was bigger than all the fear I had. And I think the inspirations from other artists continue to be my biggest source of drive. Receiving 3 Michelin stars as the first plant-based restaurant ended up being really important and such a beautiful moment. But the truth is that when I set out on this journey, I had a call with them and I said, "You've been such a big supporter and I appreciate it. And I've decided to take this new route. And I understand if that doesn't exactly fit into their story, but I wanted to let them know." And when we started out, I actually didn't want to win these awards. I mean, that was not what it was about anymore. But as we went out and as we also were criticized a lot on this journey, all of a sudden it became to me that the recognition of the established institutions all of a sudden became important. I realized that there had to be, if we don't get them all, that's fine, but there had to be some that we could change their mind on things, because that's actually change. Like, if none of the establishments change with it, it'd be hard to really create change. So I think that's why it became so important. And Michelin being the establishment that has reviewed restaurants the longest, for over 100 years, they've given out stars. And they've been criticized at times for being maybe not so up to date or not so moving with the times, or in a way getting their recognition all of a sudden became very powerful. And I think now it has other restaurants and chefs also sort of given permission to push harder into that direction. I think others seeing that Michelin is awarding this, I think it's also helpful for others to say, hey, we can do this and can still get 3 stars and can still be this successful fine dining restaurant. Because in the end of the day, certain awards do bring business. And I always say that you can only be successful if you have an audience. If you miss your audience and your restaurant is empty, you can be the greatest chef and maybe the most innovative and the most cutting edge. But if there is not an audience, you're missing the point and you're actually creating no change at all. It's always this balance. It's a conversation in a way with your guests. And like, for example, in a meal, sort of a little bit of a strategy, I'm giving away some of our secrets now. In the beginning of a meal, my belief is that you want to sort of disarm everyone. You want to sort of give the few bites that are just going to be straight up delicious, that are not going to be like pushing you into having to think about food too much, or the first few dishes need to be kind of like a hug. And then when people start to settling in, starting to smile, starting to relax, maybe then like at the third course, you can kind of maybe push the boundaries a little bit because now you have their trust. It's this conversation all along that we need to have. It's the same in music. It's the same in art. You can only speak to your audience if they're with you. You want people to say nice things about you because it's hard actually to receive criticism. No matter how long you've been in this game, it's never nice when you receive criticism. But I hope people see just the purity in our endeavor and how it really all truly comes from our heart and wanting to do the right thing and just staying true of who we are, no matter where trends go, no matter what people say about us. But I think when it's all said and done, that can people look back at it and say, hey, they really always stayed the course and they always felt they did what was in their hearts. And change comes with that because the world changes. And so we have to change with it. And we could open the same restaurant of 11 Madison Park after the pandemic, and we could have served our honey lavender duck and our butter poached lobsters, and people would have come in masses and the reviews would have applauded it. But that was not the right thing to do. As an expert in food, as someone who is having this incredible platform of 11 Madison Park, who is having this incredible team of creatives, the world did not need another butter poached lobster or another roasted duck from a creative perspective. We needed to change. We needed to speak. And I hope that people can see at the end why we all went down this path. I think in the beginning, it's like when we started cooking with vegetables, or people started being nervous about having a fully plant-based meal, and there's all this fear. It's like vegetables aren't scary. You have to be really truthful to who you are. And for me, it was easier because there was less distraction of, I grew up in Switzerland. I was really passionate about cooking, fine dining. There weren't so many options of places to go to work at. I think today with having more restaurants, having access to, we know what every restaurant, you can find out what every restaurant in the world is serving tonight. And that was not the case back then. You had like 2 places to look up to get information from. And I think in a way, for me, that was a blessing because it gave me this focus. And I think for a young professional to come up, it can be really overwhelming because there's amazing bakeries, there's amazing Italian chefs, there's amazing Japanese chefs, French chefs, plant-based chefs, fish restaurants. And so it can be quite disorienting. So I think having a focus and staying really true to that, like I think, of course, as a chef, you have to be inherently curious, but you have to be really careful with that curiosity because you can really lose yourself in that. And if you really want to make an impact, you can only be really good at a few things. You can't be a master at too many things. So having that focus, I think it's really important. And then also stay truthful to who you are. For me, I started to be in this business and I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to win the awards. And at times it was challenging because I was classically trained. But then when I moved to New York, all of a sudden it was like the days of molecular gastronomy, and it was an incredible movement and so much innovation and incredibly techniques were born. And the media was very much focusing on it and celebrating it as well. And for me, there was a moment where it was like, oh shit, like if I want to be successful, then I have to cook molecular food. It was this hyper modern, futuristic way of cooking. And I wanted to be successful so badly that for a minute, I was sort of like trying to dabble into learning these recipes and studying the books of all these great chefs and sort of trying quiet. But it was so foreign to how I grew up and who I was that at some point I was like, well, I might never become a famous chef, but I can't be someone else. And I have to stay true to who I was. And I think that was one of the biggest decisions in my life that ended up being very positively because the world actually did come back to a more traditional way of cooking. But it's hard to navigate through different trends that come and go, and which one is worth to go behind it. But I think staying true to who you are is the most important thing I think you can do.
Now let's hear from Chef Elena Reygadas from Rosetta in Mexico City.
I went abroad to live and to work, and then I realized how big and how amazing Mexican culture is. In my case, more than going abroad to learn, I went abroad because I wanted to open my eyes and learn other experiences of other cultures. But what happened really is that being far away of my country and of my culture, I realized how rich it was. Like I had two perspectives. Of course, working abroad, it was very interesting and very important for me because in a way, I felt it was more important, that it could give me more tools. Fortunately, that has changed. And now I think it's the opposite. Now people are coming to Mexico to learn. And people are going to Oaxaca to learn how to do nixtamalization and how to do tortillas and learn about corn. And that's amazing that now it's the opposite. And what I'm very happy about the new generations and happy in a very deep way is that I feel there's other pride now, not just in the food people, but in general, in this younger generation. The young generation are very proud of being Mexicans, and that didn't happen. My generation, what I think happened was that many of us that went abroad or we saw other things, we started to have restaurants of our own where we had to take the decisions. We were not only in charge of the kitchen and of the food, but everything. We had to be responsible of all the decisions. Before us, it was not like that. There was the owner that took the decisions, and there was someone that was being hired to cook. And once we took the decisions, I think that was the big change. And then this prideness we are talking about. And of course, Mexico is not only about food. It's the rich culture that we have, that it just blends together. It's not that museums are here and restaurants are here and architecture is on the other side. It's like the same people that appreciate to go to a good meal, appreciate to go to a restaurant, appreciate. It's a way of being more sensible to the beauty of life and the beauty of cultures and the richness, appreciate the richness of different cultures. And as you say, Gabriel, I think Mexico, it's very unique in terms of having past and present alive in every sense, then being so biodiverse and having so much richness in terms of nature, in terms of ingredients, in terms of what we have. I mean, after I was working in London, I realized how lucky I was being a Mexican. And that's why I wanted to come back to Mexico and have my restaurant in Mexico. I felt it was much more fun and much more beautiful because everything made much sense for me in my case. And I do feel there's a change, even more that there's many young people that are very close to the land, people that come from families that grow their own corn, that are the ones that are cooking. That's even more very rich and very unique. It's this young generation of many of them, their parents have been in the fields, so they know what that is. And they are not just being proud, but understanding what's behind. Someone like Talia Barrios or Gustavo Macuitl are examples of this type of young chefs that I think would be even much more beautiful for the future. Well, not the future, that's the present already. Some of the food that used to go abroad because it was better paid or was not a quality for Mexico, it was a better quality than that what Mexico wanted. Some of that food, it's staying now in Mexico. And I think restaurants can do a lot related to that. If, as a chef, you really support the producers, the farmers that look into quality, and you pay for that quality, I'm very happy that this can be more and more happening. Like the best quality is staying in our country. I think in a restaurant, a chef can decide a lot about what to choose, what to cook with, and then you can preserve biodiversity when you decide to use as much produce as you can, respecting the cycles of nature and not using mango all year round, using it when it's really its season. But not only using mangoes, using other fruits that can be more challenging to cook with because maybe are not so known and maybe it's a flavor that is not that easy because it's not that known, like nanches or chico zapote. The more we use it in restaurants, the more we will preserve our biodiversity. People, our guests, our customers will know this fruit. At the end, I think we are just like transmitters of biodiversity. If we use mamey and people love the mamey, they will start buying mamey, they will start using it at their houses, their children will start to get used to that flavor. But if we keep on using only strawberries and raspberries and figs because they're so beautiful and delicious and they're so pretty, then what will happen with nanche and zapote negro and many beautiful things that are from our culture? And of course, biodiversity. And in terms of flavor, we're losing so much. I read this book of Dan Saladino. I don't know if you know it. It's an amazing book. Dan Saladino is a writer from the UK. And I was amazed to see the numbers he said related to how little we use in all the world in terms of produce and how we are using more and more the same ingredients. It doesn't matter where we are. And as chefs, I think we have a responsibility to stop doing that. We cannot keep just serving lobster because it's like a glamorous dish. We should make of a zucchini a glamorous ingredient. We should really try to use what's known as a humble ingredient to take this idea of being humble and to just make it the most beautiful thing. It doesn't matter if it's low or high in cost. We should take the beauty of each ingredient. And the more ingredients we use from the region we are from, I think we can keep biodiversity. The more you found, the more you get excited about, and then you start to see what happens in your customers when they start to discover these ingredients, when you are the one that makes someone discover this ingredient and it's so happy because it's really like a new flavor. It's like, I think that's one of the most beautiful things, at least for someone that cooks, can feel. If something like a mamey, for example, it's a fruit that I have since I was little in milkshake. It's very easy. You just put milk, the mamey, you don't need to put anything else. And then you start playing with it and people will start to love it. You feel there's so much things there that can happen the same. And I think it's like an exercise. Like the more you start to do that, the more it comes. Like now, for example, we are working with tamarind because I love the acidity of tamarind. And I think although it's not indigenous from Mexico, it's nowadays a very Mexican flavor. We use a lot of tamarind and chili in sweets. And we're working in everything with tamarind at the moment, but without the sugar. So it's also a way of, okay, let's make the ingredients as it is. What happens if we take out the sugar and then instead of using it as a sweet, we use it as a sour thing? And it's another way of giving like a opportunity to the palate. And of course, my priority in Rosetta is to make people to feel very happy with what they eat and very fulfilled in their stomach and in their heart, and not just to be like a kind of a rational, conceptual restaurant. I always try to go further. But of course, flavor and fulfillment of the heart and of the stomach needs to be first. But if on top of that, I can give a customer a new flavor or just a twist on that flavor, I think that's beautiful. I think people love that. I love that. I love to go and maybe some ingredient that I felt I didn't like it and suddenly I taste it in another way and I love it. So I just think it's a matter of letting yourself go and trying to make that ingredient shine. Because it's not just about the ingredient. Of course, ingredient it's what's on front, but what's behind of that? I think it's when you understand the people that harvest certain ingredient and has been harvesting for all their lives And suddenly, if they stop harvesting that and start to just grow potatoes for sabritas to make potato chips, they lose their connection with the land. They lose many things. Food is very powerful because it connects with so much. And I think that's what we need to take into consideration, especially, for example, herbs. That's a beautiful example. All the knowledge that's in Mexico in herbs, not just in terms of food, but in terms of healing ourselves through herbs and not having to go to the pharmacy to get just other type of healing things that in the end they don't heal at all. That's part of our culture. And that's why we need to use those herbs. And I just feel the more we use, the more we preserve. My hope is that we can eat, the whole world can eat better. And I hope the food industrialization system I hope it breaks down and real food, fresh, pure food can be what feeds the world and not industrialized, packaged, full of hormones and full of fertilizers and full of hybrids. I really wish we can have a system where we can eat pure, good, healthy food that it's the best for ourselves, but also for the planet. And in that sense, having less illness and less problems of health that we have more and more. I really hope we, as a society, fight industrialized food because that's destroying our planet, ourselves, our health, our culture, our society. And I really feel we should see at our food, at our ingredients, as one of the most rich things that culture and people have, because from there is everything. If we take care of our crops, we take care of our ground, we take care of the water, of our history, of our culture, of our prideness. So I really hope we can push to having a change on that. I would like that through my work, people can know more Mexican ingredients, more Mexican traditions, more ways of the Mexican food culture. I think if I am a motor of showing things and through that we preserve more, I'm very happy with that. Through food, you can be your own and you can really transmit your beliefs and your values. And I hope young generations stay very close to that and just trust themselves into that. The more we can be ourselves and be less generic, the more richer we will be always. So I think just we need to do what we love and we don't need to think on what works or what can be a trend or we just need to focus on what we love the most because then we will be really giving something unique. But I think, yes, cooking and food is expression of yourself, especially cooking. It's an act of generosity and of giving yourself. But if you can really give yourself and who you are and what your values are, then I think that's the best. One of those things are awards, which I believe can be something very important for what you do, for your team, for everyone that puts so much effort into it. And however, it's not that we do what we do to get an award. We do what we do because we love to be a place that people can come and give all their trust and we can share what we get happy about. But in what happened with this award that I was given 2023, honestly, I understand why there's this controversy because it would be great if it wasn't necessary. It would be amazing if we were many women chefs known. But what happens is that we are not there yet. And hopefully one day we will be, and we will see many more women being recognized as leaders in the kitchen. Because of course, I think everyone knows and understands that women have been historically the ones that have been related to the kitchen, to feed people, to make people coming together through food. That's a fact. I think in most of the cultures, especially in Mexican culture. At least it's my culture and it's where I can talk about. And what it's a paradox is that although there has been the women that have been taking care of food, of recipes, of tradition, of the culture around food, there's not many women leading restaurants in the sense of international restaurants. And in that sense, this award, I think it's important since it's a way to encourage more women to do so. And honestly, until I got it, I realized that it was important. Because when I got it, what was very beautiful and the most surprising thing was that the award that was not for me. The award was for many Mexican women. They all felt recognized through this award. Of course, the people from my team, and especially touched by the women, but many more women that cook at home, that cook in other restaurants, that are close to food, they took that award as their own. And they were very proud of that award being given to a Mexican woman because they felt it theirs. And I think that's the beauty. And also, I think the beauty of this award is that many young girls, young women that want to be chefs, through this award, they felt it was, like more possible. It was really like an example or a way to do so. Like I am in my restaurants, I am in my bakery almost every morning when I am in Mexico. And to get people to come close and to tell me you're an inspiration, I felt very touched. And I realized how important these awards can be. More than for the people that get the award, for the people that take this award as a pride. And I believe we are slowly getting more trust from people. And of course, this type of award showcases that. Usually, women are not that related to professional lives. Women are related to family lives, to children, to other type of activities. But in the last years, we've seen so much change going on through this, but still we have to do so much. But I definitely think this type of award is a way to also give people trust, to investors to trust. And sometimes they even feel more trust in women, I think, like little by little. But I think the very difficult part is being a professional and a mother, especially in a job as a chef and having a restaurant that you need so much hours. You need to spend so much hours. It's not a classic job in terms of hours. It's not 9 to 6. We work until very late. That's been the most difficult challenge, in my last 16 years, to balance my motherhood, being close to my daughters, and take care of what I love and what I do. And it has not been easy, but the way I have done it is to understand, first of all, that I'm doing my best and I cannot do everything perfect. And I think sometimes as women, as mothers, we put so much pressure onto ourselves into being the perfect mother to give the most amazing childhood to your family that it could be hard. And there's so much feeling of guiltiness. I first of all understood that I didn't had to feel guilty, that if I was working was for my daughters, but also for myself, because it's something I love and it's something that I need to do. And it's a way of being a mother as well. I think through example, through every day getting early, seeing your daughters, running to your job, coming back, they see all the effort and they see that it's not an easy thing. And it's also a way of being a mother, even though I cannot be 24 hours with them and I haven't been. However, I am very proud of how I have done as a mother. I more and more feel as my daughters become older and they start to have their lives, I am very happy I did what I did. Because I think every human needs to fulfill their individuality, their passion, and be as more profoundly happy with what she or he likes to do, because that's the real happiness in life, just to really do what you love. At some point, my daughters will do what they love, and it's important to feel we are individuals, although we are a family, and we need to fulfill our individuality. And that's on the side of them and explaining this to them and not feeling guilty myself. But also, of course, I've been able to do this with an amazing team that since day one, they knew I was a mother and that I couldn't be at the kitchen 24 hours and that I had to sometimes run in the middle of even a service because something had happened. And because of that condition, I had to lead on trust, and my team also had to embrace that. And I know it's not the usual way of being a chef, that it's there just telling what to do all the time, because I had to run back and forward. If you have other responsibilities in life, very important responsibilities like having 2 daughters and being responsible for them, of course you need to have other type of leadership. And I think it's a leadership that it's based on trust, and it's based on sometimes letting it go, and sometimes understand that it's very important to take care of your family. Even though you love your restaurant, you love what you do. I am so happy that I have my daughters, even though it has been a big challenge. I feel they have always given me ground. Like they really push me to be very disciplined in terms of time, but also to understand what's the real happiness in life.
On the next episode of Effects of Change.
A restaurant basically touches on every single major sustainability, social, or economic issue that we're facing globally.
We exist to encourage people who are working in hospitality to dare to make a difference.
Treating staff fairly is fundamentally a sustainability issue. For the sustainability of our industry,
we aim for them to leave with is real tools that they can use immediately upon returning to their restaurants.
Effects of Change is produced by myself, Gabriel Ornelas, edited, mixed, and mastered by Dylan Agajanian, with original music by Dylan Agajanian.